done a libretto for an opera, which
Too.
what inside of you creatively called you to do something like that? What was it?
I'm going to try to do this in a short answer, Jody, as best I can. I was a musical child. I'm always very attuned. I didn't, that's no pun, to the world, to the sound of the world. It sounds like music to me. I listen to your voice and I think of, this is your unique song, and I'll remember that, and I'll recognize your voice. I may recognize your voice if I see you way out of context 10 years from now, I'll recognize your voice before I recognize your face. That was me. But as a teen, I went off on a very different path and joined the Hasidim and became ultra-orthodox for many years of my life, and literally put my music away in the closet. I played cello and it lived in my closet. When I got out of that and got my own life, which set off my career path, I stumbled into a job for the Houston Grand Opera. It wasn't something I asked for. It wasn't something I expected. It's a whole story how that happened to me. I had just completed a degree in creative writing from the University of Houston. But they wanted a local writer who would go interview people in the city and who were immigrants and refugees, and to build an opera based on their stories. So right at this sort of formative time when I was just learning what this country is, what I'm doing here, because I'd been gone so long, I was a Rip Van Winkle. I was suddenly surrounded by music. They gave me an office to work from. They pipe in the music of the rehearsals. It was there all the time. And I went and refurbished my cello and dove back in it during that time to my own musical life. That opera was a big success. New York Times Review, national. It had a national broadcast. It was called The Refuge. The music was by Christopher Theophanidis. And it kind of set me on this sort of secondary career path. Like, I became a writer. That is my thing. That's my real job. But every now and then some composer shows up and goes, I want to write this music. Can you write the words? And the times I've done that for Houston Grand Opera, for the Houston Symphony, for Houston Chamber Chorus with the wonderful local composer Mark Buller, have just been closest to my soul of anything in the world. And when I finally kind of broke back away from people snatching me by the collar and saying, please write this, and wrote my memoir about leaving Hasidic life, I wove music all through my book. The sound of a cello in that book is kind of the sound of my soul trying to get out. And after that book came out, lo and behold, this nationally known composer, a Jewish woman named Lori Laitman, found me and read my book and called me up, and we met. And she wanted to write an opera based on Uncovered, on my memoirs. So I walked back into opera world again. I wrote that libretto. And when you write a libretto, it's like a stage play, but you have to have in mind that they're going to sing every word. So, there's details to how to do that I kind of learned on the job. She just finished that opera. We had a whole schedule of performances, but COVID. So a little bit of it's going to be performed online, but mainly the schedule of performances have been deferred for, we hope, no more than a year. It'll play in New York City.
Are you comfortable explaining why you felt like you were Rip Van Winkle for a long time?
I was born in Dallas to Jewish parents, mid-century, grew up in public school. I'm a Texas Jewish girl. All four of my grandparents were the proverbial turn of the 20th century refugees, and two of them were in Dallas too. I grew up among them. So I heard Yiddish with a Texas accent. Of course, I was taught to crochet with a fine needle, but I also learned to ride a horse. And like in Houston at that time, the Dallas Jewish community was very, very tight. It was, you know, it was a very loving and very close community. So I got my sense of being Jewish more as a communal thing. I rebelled and I joined the Hasidim. They have a strict and literal interpretation of Jewish law, and Jewish law is a vast and detailed compendium. So to step into Hasidic life is to make a full boat commitment that Jewish law will literally govern every moment and movement and idea in your life. And those communities are pretty separate.
And so you were in this separate community for what, 20?
Oh, you asked me about Rip Van Winkle. That's where we were going. Yeah, I joined them and I lived among them for close to 30 years. Had an arranged marriage. I was engaged at 18 years old and married at 19. We were married 27 years. They don't allow birth control. I had 7 children. That will immerse you like nothing else. Who had time to think hypothetically beyond those parameters? They really frowned on having a television or source of media through most of those years, or reading secular books or going to movies. I fell completely out of step with American society, even though it was my own society, even though I was born and raised here in the real world. So that when I finally got honest with myself that, you know, ideologically I had lost my faith, but also I finally got honest with myself that I'm a lesbian, that I had hidden for many years, and it was a very painful thing. When you live among the Hasidim as a woman, your ideas, your feelings, your needs, women are, everyone, men and women, but I think particularly women are made feel guilty about ever putting their needs first. The worst epithet in that community is quote unquote selfish.
But how did you deal with the fact that you are a lesbian and you've got 7 kids, you're in a community which back then, I don't know how it is now, but my hunch is that they didn't exactly were thrilled with the idea. It's just phenomenal, the inner strength that you found.
When you begin to feel your life depends on it, you don't feel like it's courage. It's and really, in a way, all our lives depend on simply being honest and moving toward what we need to be and do in life before it's too late. I just yearn. I kind of mourn a little bit for the lost years, and creatively for me as an artist, because that's very much a passion and has been ever since. And I've been successful with it, moderately, but
sounds very successful.
When I say successful, you know, you interview business people, and to be successful as an artist, I had to become a business person. And I'm not going to talk to you here about publishing contracts, book production, shipping, warehousing, and navigating Amazon, or specialty marketing and specialty advertisements and international marketing. I mean, I had to learn about all that stuff, and it's not the part of my brain that I'm wired for. And many artists just go, I didn't major in business intentionally, and then they stay home and make their art, but it doesn't really go anywhere. I was very driven by the fact that to me, writing is a conversation. And I couldn't have the conversation. All those years that I was Hasidic, I used to write stories and essays, and I literally hid them in a basket underneath my bed. The most terrifying thing I ever did was to pull a piece out and share it with a writer I had just met, the first writer I'd ever met, a Jewish woman who didn't set about to save my life, but the fact that someone listened and took it seriously and responded, the fact that I could have a conversation about what had become most core to me saved my life. The more I had that, the more I knew that this is where I need to be. So I did move into that business end. But that wasn't, the main thing was that first I was focused on so-called product. And I was starting to say, but earlier, that it's a different kind of business in the sense that I don't measure my success in terms of units sold, but in terms of how many conversations have I been able to have. At this point, I've had conversations about my book with people in every walk of life you could imagine and from all over the world. And after 27 years of silence, there's nothing I could ever want more.
Yes, and I love the way you define success.
That's how I define it. So, like, we just wrote an opera based on my memoir. It's going to be performed at university campuses. The premiere will be at the University of Utah. Yeah, at the University of Utah. And they jumped at it and paid extra for the commission to house the premiere because of their Mormon student body. So
I'm not getting this.
Is that wonderful?
I mean,
well, this is the kind of conversation that I didn't get to have before. It's with women from all over the world whose religion tells them this is how to be a woman with a capital W. Conform and follow these rules and put your adherence to these rules as make them a priority over your passions. Submit to that, and then God will love you. Religions that tell women that their language of prayer is submission. I've had conversations with women from all over the world who have been told that. Muslim women, my book is being translated into Arabic, and now the opera will premiere on a largely Mormon campus. These are the conversations that I want to have more than anything. Will those students pay very much for the ticket? Will it impact me tremendously? I promise you not. Do I care at this point? Well, I have a spouse who also has an income that really helps. People come to me and say, how can I be an artist? And I say, A, don't quit your day job, and B, marry a grown-up. I understand that it's a luxury for me to say that the conversation is my bottom line on my financial statements. The financial statements in my creative brain. But I still say it because I know I'd be sacking groceries if I had to, so that I could continue doing what I'm doing. In fact, I was terrified of just this issue for a long time. And I stayed a number of years in the Hasidic world beyond when I already said, okay, you need to leave, you're a lesbian, you don't believe in this stuff, life is passing quickly, you're approaching middle age, get out. And I continued to stay because I was terrified about that bottom line. I had a meal ticket. It's a terrible thing to say, but my husband had a regular job and we have 7 children. It's not so terrible when we think about how many women remain in unfulfilling situations for practical reasons. So I'm very well aware of what I'm saying. But I did come to a point in Hasidic life when I said, that's it. I can't be afraid. I will sack groceries if I have to. And by God, I will survive. I don't need much. I will survive. I will get out and start my life again. And my first apartment was an efficiency. It was okay. I thought it was the most beautiful place in the world.
Now I'm also hearing, because I know you said it to people that could relate because of a lot of restrictions placed on them. You know, our brains, our cells put restrictions on us. And to me, and I read, and I'm still reading your book, and I thought, it reminds me of what I told myself for many years that kept myself down. Now, I was not in a
There you
ultra
go.
religious area or whatever you call it, but it was me that kept me down.
There
And
you
I
go.
think that's why I could relate to your book, because I could feel that. I always felt like this heavy air. It was like, I could only read so much at a time because it's just so, I remember almost wanting to cry because I remember there's a part in your book you said, I took my cello because she left her and she put it in the closet. You were just married. And I just remember thinking, what have I put in the closet? Over the years, that when I did something against my own personal integrity, what did I put in that closet? And I really, really, that stopped me for a while. I thought, this is something that to me is much more universal than, I think it's all of us that have enslaved ourselves for one reason or not been true to our own personal integrity for one reason or another.
It does go far beyond religion, but I think you're being a little hard on yourself. You didn't put that narrative in your head. You heard that narrative from a young age, and that was written on a blank slate. All of us grew up in a society that at its very best, even today, tells women contradictory stories. Be a good mommy, be a good wife. When you get, especially us Jewish women, when are you going to get married? Give me grandchildren. That's your priority. That's the most joyous thing in the world, even though not every woman in the world is suited for motherhood. That's the message we get of marriage and motherhood, marriage and motherhood. We still got, at our age, we got that message very, very strongly. And along with that message came a sort of a global definition of women. I mean, we gleaned a lot of information by the fact that by the boys who dominated our school classes, or the limited opportunities for women, or the beautifully talented women we knew who couldn't rise up in their corporations, or those are subliminal messages. So I think you're being a little hard on yourself. You didn't do it by yourself.
Well, I understand what you're saying. It's just like what you did. You had the outside, this outside Hasidim, and I had inside what I had chosen to do and what I chose to do for many years when I was married, and how I did it and what I
You
chose.
chose to be good.
Sight and music. I say music comes to my mind, and I think music with words and music with like a kind of like attuned to your life. It is like this long, wonderful opera.
It's funny how sometimes the things you back into and don't plan can be the most important opportunities of your whole life. That's what happened with the opera, and it opened up my. I had to recognize what it opened up. I think I've learned, because I got a second chance to start my life again. And I was timid and I was terrified and I was really out of step and I really didn't have money. When the first opera opportunity came along, I was bowled over, not with excitement. I actually got in the car and went downtown and met with the opera director, who was Anthony Freud at the time, and sat down in his little office to tell him, "Are you nuts? You're going to take a chance on me, this place, your reputation? Like, don't do this. I'm not suited for this job." I actually went there to tell him that. And ultimately, and then sitting there, I realized that I knew step one. And I knew that if I could just do step one to the best of my ability, I'd make a connection and it would show me step two. So I said to him, "I'll tell you what," because he wouldn't take no for an answer. I said, "I'll tell you what, I'll accept this commission and I will take it only as far as I can do to the standard that you and I both set. And at the point when I can no longer do that, I will hand this work back to you unfinished. That is the only terms under which I'll accept the contract. And he accepted it on that basis. And at every step, I figured out the next step. We finished it. And it opened up something else. After that experience, I told myself that professionally, the things I was most terrified to do were probably the most important things in my life. And I looked at fear as a red flag pointing out a path. And I absolutely forced myself to walk exactly in that direction. It's not always true. I'm also afraid to jump off of cliffs. It doesn't mean I go jump off a cliff. It means that there are times when I have to be honest with myself, at the same time that I'm terrified, my gut is going, but if you can, this will be the most amazing thing you've ever done. If you can. It was when I was afraid of something that wasn't going to hurt me. So it's not, I'm not saying I stopped listening to my feelings. I'm saying I started listening to all my feelings, including my fear, and stopped soothing myself out of it. I'm a very timid person. So as I said, I had to learn to listen to my fear as well. That's the biggest part of my whole career. Right now, my book is being translated into Arabic. It'll be released for free download. This was a donation on my part for free download, because in the Arabic speaking world, there are very few bookstores and very poor book distribution. They've got several different regimes have their countries locked up in terms of freedom of mind. And so this organization was formed by Arabic speaking immigrants and refugees to this country to collect books that they felt could really encapsulate not only that what they considered Western freedom of mind, but the journey to achieving it, and approached me about my book because of the enormous overlap with women who are covered women throughout the Muslim world. I was terrified. I'm a Jewish person. I was told that their platform is online, goes out to millions and millions of people. Part of their platform is a secret open forum of former Muslims, and they call themselves ex-Muslims or apostates, free thinkers who are raised in the kind of religion I was raised in. And some of them have been killed. I was terrified. And I consulted with friends, and they told me, do not do this. But if you open my book, on page 1, it's dedicated to my mother and to my covered sisters everywhere. That was the ultimate conversation I wanted to have. To women everywhere who feel covered in whatever way. And I decided to go ahead with it. When they make it available electronically for free download, that means women can download it to their cell phones that they hold in the pocket of their.
And you got the belief by doing the action.
Everyone believes in themselves. They're afraid to. You don't hear a clear voice, especially if you haven't listened in many years. You hear conflicting voices. But the love of self is always there. It's part of being human. So yeah, I heard all the reasons not to in my head, and I heard all of the voices saying this isn't right. I heard the voices that said, you don't deserve this either. But I got honest and knew that beneath that was the gut going, if you can do it, this will be the most important thing of your life. I'm not going to waste any more time. I'm 64 years old. I'm not going to waste any more years waiting and, trying to get better before I feel I deserve what I need to do in my career and my life. I have to give it a go.